Now, before these turkeys get away with the power vested in me, I want to grant popcorn a full reprieve. Come on.
No.
I want popcorn. You have a full reprieve from cranberry sauce and stuffing. We wish you well, and we're going to give Carmel a break as well. Right.
President Obama has pardoned 2 birds each Thanksgiving for the past 5 years. In both 2009 and 2012, he pardoned more turkeys than people. Overall, Obama has granted clemency to just 39 people. At the same point in his presidency, Ronald Reagan had pardoned 313 people. Harry Truman pardoned 1,537 people. According to an analysis last year by ProPublica, which studied applications for pardons processed by the Justice Department, Obama's granted clemency to just 2% of applicants. To talk more about this, we're joined by Anthony Papa, artist, writer, noted advocate against the war on drugs. He served 12 years in prison for a first-time nonviolent drug offense. He was freed only after being granted executive clemency by then New York Governor George Pataki. Tony Papa is co-founder of the Mothers of the New York Disappeared and works as the media manager at the Drug Policy Alliance. He's also author of 15 to Life, How I Painted My Way to Freedom. And he just published a Huffington Post piece headlined, President Obama Pardoned Both the Turkey and Drug War Prisoners for the Holidays. Welcome to Democracy Now!, Tony. It's great to have you back. First, talk about your own story very briefly, if you would.
Well, I was a first-time nonviolent drug offender that basically in 1985, I made the biggest mistake of my life. I brought an envelope up from the Bronx to Mount Vernon for $500. It was an envelope containing 4 ounces of cocaine. I walked into a police sting operation. I did everything I could do wrong, and eventually I was sentenced to 15 years to life under the Rockefeller drug laws of New York State. Went to prison. Was lost, didn't know what to do, discovered my talent as an artist. That's how I transcended the negativity of imprisonment, and basically painted a self-portrait in 1988. One night I was sitting in my cell, picked up a mirror, I looked in the mirror, I saw an individual who was going to spend the most productive years of his life in a cage, painted the self-portrait, and it appeared at the Whitney Museum of American Art about 7 years later. And I was granted, got a lot of publicity on my case, and was granted executive clemency by Governor George Pataki. I came out, wanted to do something about those that I left behind, so I started a group, co-founded a group, Mothers of the New York Disappeared, became leading activists in New York State to fight the draconian Rockefeller drug laws. Basically, the laws had a couple of revisions, and then recently, 2009, Governor Patterson stepped up to the plate and reformed the Rockefeller drug laws in a historic way.
And explain the whole concept of mandatory minimums, which the Rockefeller drug laws are based on.
Mandatory minimums is take away the discretion of the judges to look at the totality of facts. So basically, the judge in my case didn't want to sentence me to 15 years to life, but he had to because of mandatory minimum sentencing, which dictates that he had to do it.
So talk about your piece that you wrote for the Huffington Post, President Obama pardoned both the turkey and drug war prisoners for the holiday.
That piece, every year at about this time, I always write a letter, a request to the sitting governor of New York State, which is Andrew Cuomo now. And in the request, I asked if they can use their clemency powers to address the issue of people who were sentenced to draconian sentences under mandatory minimum sentencing that are stuck in prison. They have no judicial relief left, but the only way out to get their freedom is for the governor to grant them executive clemency. And in the case of federal prisoners, right now, Obama, with his administration, who recently spoke out about mandatory minimum sentencing through Attorney General Holder a couple of months ago, called for changing these mandatory minimum sentencing laws because the system became broken because of it. I mean, 2.3 million Americans locked up, 500,000 because of the drug war in the federal system, over 100,000. So there's got to be somebody that's eligible for executive clemency. I mean, look, if you could give a turkey a second chance, why can't you give a nonviolent drug offender a second chance?
Let's go to that speech of Eric Holder, the Attorney General, unveiling this major policy shift to help certain low-level drug offenders avoid harsh mandatory minimum prison sentences. This was an address to the American Bar Association. He announced a review of the racial sentencing disparities.
Today, a vicious cycle of poverty, criminality, and incarceration traps too many Americans and weakens too many communities. And many aspects of our criminal justice system may actually exacerbate these problems rather than alleviate them. It's clear as we come together today that too many Americans go to too many prisons for far too long and for no truly good law enforcement reason.
That was Eric Holder. Anthony Papa, your response.
Well, look, I think I congratulate Eric Holder and the Obama administration. And these are words, and I don't know how they're going to affect people who are sentenced under the draconian drug law sentencing and who are stuck in prison. I'm hoping that he comes through and in some way these mandatory minimum sentences would be revised and people would get some relief. My whole thing is I would ask President Obama, why not help those prisoners? In 2010, he signed into legislation new revised crack cocaine sentencing, where the 100-to-1 ratio went away and 18-to-1 came into place, and it affected people. But there's about 5,000 prisoners who that law didn't affect because it wasn't applied retroactively. So I would say, with a swipe of a pen, you could save these 5,000 people who are stuck in prison under old crack cocaine laws, which, if they were made retroactive, they would be free anyway.
So let me ask you about the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, which found more than 3,200 people nationwide serving terms, life terms without parole for nonviolent offenses, 80% of them behind bars for drug-related offenses, 65% African-American, 18% white, 16% Latino, evidence of what the ACLU calls extreme racial disparities. This is a clip from a video that features family members of some of the more than 600 prisoners it profiles.
Everything he did was to hurt himself, not others. And it went from 1 year sentence to 2 year sentence to natural life.
My dad will never get out for something so little, natural life.
For stealing a $150 jacket. And that $150 jacket got him life in prison.
Here in Louisiana, they use that habitual offender law, 3 strikes, you automatically get natural life.
It's like giving them a death sentence because there's no life for a man with his children or his parents or anybody else once they're in there.
Judge should have the discretion not to give the life sentence. I mean, that's extreme. You tell that to anybody, that's a little bit too much. That's almost gets to be the point that that's not what the forefathers envisioned, even with the Constitution. That's extreme. That's cruel and unusual punishment to me.
He's a good person. My dad, I mean, he's always, like I said, he's always been there for me, my sister and brother. He's always done his best until he started abusing the drugs.
And a lot of times with Patrick with the drugs, it came down to not being able to find work.
Life sentence is no way to deal with a drug addiction.
My son wasn't a menace to society. He would give his shirt off his back.
And being so tenderhearted in a place like that, it just doesn't fit. It's changed him that way because I notice he is getting a little colder. I find that he's not believing it. He's not keeping his faith as much. He's like, I'm about ready to give up on this.
Oh, it's been hard. I go down there and sin. I can't hardly stand to leaving, but I know I have to go. It'd be hard. It is hard.
To tell him what I ate for Thanksgiving and he couldn't eat it. You know, it's hard, just little things like that.
And my birthday coming up, and those are days I break.
But if this person can go back and be a productive citizen and not commit crimes again, these nonviolent crimes, then why are we keeping him here spending all this money because maybe I've done my job, so he should have a parole hearing.
It's too many families that's suffering out here.
Give him a second chance. He's 54 years old now.
I'm looking for things to change.
Because these boys are just getting wasted away in these prisons for no reason.
That is an ACLU video, people talking about their loved ones in prison. Yesterday, the Washington Post had an editorial, Obama neglects his power to pardon. At least Mr. Obama's aware he possesses the power of clemency. Unpardonably, though, the Washington Post writes, with the exception of the silly Thanksgiving ritual in which he spares a turkey by executive order, he virtually never discusses this prerogative and rarely uses it. They end this first paragraph by saying, in fact, no modern president comes close to Mr. Obama in meting out mercy so rarely and so stingily. And they go on, Anthony Papa, to cite your piece in the Huffington Post, as saying, as the Huffington Post noted, so far in his presidency, Mr. Obama has pardoned about the same number of drug offenders, 11, as turkeys, 10.
Right. Well, I guess he likes turkeys better than drug offenders. You know, if I had to tell you, send a message to the President Obama, I would tell him that, you know, because of my personal experience, and I received executive clemency, it saved my life. It saves the lives of many who have fallen through the cracks of the criminal justice system, and it wrongs the rights of laws that are very draconian in nature. And I think the powers of clemency should be exercised more. Look, politicians don't get political points from giving clemencies or pardons, but if you look at it at a humanistic view, where compassion is used by these individuals, people make mistakes in their lives, and they need and hopefully they could change their lives while inside, but they get stuck because of these draconian mandatory minimum sentencing laws. So hopefully President Obama will exercise his pardon powers, commutation powers more, and also governors. Governor Andrew Cuomo of New York, since he's been in office, he hasn't given one clemency or pardon. So even Andrew Cuomo is afraid to use the pardoning power. I guess because there's no real way to score politically, and it's only could be a negative aspect.
I mean, you were just recently on a panel at the New School, right, with governors, judges.
Right, and I was with former governors, and Governor Eldridge, Senator Kerry, and they all talked about this issue, that these people they're not using their pardon powers enough. There's actually a group of ex-governors now, with Jason Flom and his people, put together this panel of ex-governors that are trying to influence sitting governors to use the issue of pardons and the powers of commutation more.
For those who are interested, the way the Washington Post ends is citing exactly what President Obama's power is, that he can act in selected cases on his own, empowered by Article 2, Section 2 of the Constitution, which permits him the ability to grant reprieves and pardons for offenses against the United States. They said that virtually unrestricted power has been used too sparingly for many years. In your case, we'll end, Anthony, by you talking about how in prison you found art as your form of liberation that ultimately gained you the attention that got you out of jail.
Right. I transcended the negativity of imprisonment, the situation where I discovered my talent as an artist. I found meaning in my life. There are many individuals in prison under these draconian drug laws, under mandatory minimum sentencing, who are stuck there, and they have no other relief than to ask those who are sitting in power, these politicians who have the power to commute, the power to give pardons and executive clemency. And I'm asking them to look at this issue and please help these people regain their freedom. They deserve to come home to their families.